People are still finishing up their quiz. Point one, we're not passing these quizzes up. These are for you. It's just to give you an idea of where you stand with the material so far, what you might need to refresh, and it'll help studying towards any final tests. As questions like this will probably be on that. So we're just going to go over them quickly. The first question: the 4 preconditions of prayer are. The first one. Qibla is one of them. The other one? Sisters? Time. So it's time, purity of self-enclosed, purity of place, and determining the Qibla. So those are the 4 preconditions. The 3 types of water. So the first is tahur, then tahir, and the third? Najis, impure. So the first 2, purifying. That's water that you can use to make wudu or ghusl. It not only is pure to drink and to do other things with, but it also serves to purify yourself if you need to make wudu or ghusl. The second type is tahir. It's pure, which means you can drink it, you can bathe in it, you can use it for cooking, but it's not purifying, meaning that it's been contaminated enough that it doesn't count for making wudu with. And the last is najis. That water is impure, and the ruling on that water is that you're supposed to dispose of it as soon as possible. 2 of the 4 obligatory body parts of wudu. Face is one.
Hair.
Hands. It's actually hands up to the elbows, so the whole arm. Feet.
Head.
And head. All right. So again, the 4 are the face, your hands and arms up to your elbows, your head, and your feet. This last one should be pretty easy for everybody. What are the 5 obligatory prayers?
I remember this Fidami.
That's is that Persian?
That was the first letter.
Oh, that's like a mnemonic tool that you use. Okay, I got it. All right, so the first one. Fajr.
Zohar, Asr, Maghrib, Isha.
Awesome. Maghrib and Isha. Okay.
Is there one that's more important than the rest?
So all 5 are 100% obligatory. They carry the same reward and punishment. There are some prayers that people miss sometimes. And so there are hadith emphasizing the importance of doing this, like for instance, there's hadith and I'm sorry. Part of the question was, is there one that's more important than the others? The short answer is no, they're all equally important. The reward of doing them is the same for all, and the punishment for missing them is the same for all. However, some prayers, because of just the way that things are, people tend to miss sometimes. Fajr, people oversleep sometimes. Also, the Prophet ﷺ emphasized in more than one hadith the importance of Salatul Asr. This is that's one of the things that's in this bonus question. Salatul Asr is particularly important. He said that it's the prayer that distinguishes the believers from the hypocrites. And I'm paraphrasing there. So all prayers are equally important, but just know that sometimes there's a tendency to miss certain ones, maybe because you're busy in the middle of your day, or because you oversleep, or because you fall asleep early before you pray Isha. And if you have one of those issues that you're facing, try to make a plan for overcoming it. If you're falling asleep before you pray Isha and sleeping through the night, then try to pray it as early as possible. If you're having trouble waking up in the morning, set like a 3rd and 4th and 5th alarm. And if you're sleeping through all of those, what I heard one sheikh say is, drink like a half a gallon of water before you go to bed. You'll get up no matter what.
What if you're really sleepy and you make the Isha, the 4 rakats obligatory, but like you're too tired or something? Is your
So, witr. The sister's asking about the witr, which is the salah that's after. It's a sunnah prayer, but it's strongly emphasized. For most schools, it's what's considered a sunnah mu'akkada, which is a highly emphasized sunnah. For the Hanafi school, they actually say that it's wajib, which means that it's obligatory to a lesser sense. It's not fard, so that it's absolutely obligatory, but it is still something that you have to do. And leaving it off regularly for the Hanafi school is sinful. Yeah, I mean, what's important is that you're able to get these 5 prayers in. The Sunnah prayers are very important, and there's usefulness to them. They're actually good for us. It's a blessing that we have them. But as long as you're able to do your 5, focus on that. And then if you can expand it and add the Sunnahs, then that's useful as well. But just make these your main focus. And if you find the strength to do the other ones, then that's good too. So again, witr, it is considered basically an obligation in one of the 4 schools, the Hanafi school, such that if you leave it off regularly without an excuse, you're sinful. But the other 3 main schools hold that it's just an emphasized sunnah, and not just. I mean, you should still do it, but it's not sinful to leave it off. So, how many people, just by a show of hands, were able to get something for the bonus question? All right. So the reason I put the bonus question in is that we're learning a lot of information, rulings, explanation of the rules, why we do certain things, what the things are that we have to do, what's permissible, what's not permissible, what the parameters are of our practice. And all of that is absolutely essential. However, it is also really important that we be able to tie these things to the tradition, to be able to find a link for why we do the things that we do with where that source comes from. And the hadith that Sheikh Shadi listed here in chapter 2, that's pages 8 through 10 in your book, every single one of them is valuable. You should read them again if you haven't read them since we went through them. And try to, and I don't mean memorize like the whole chain of transmission and where it's found and in which book of hadith and the exact wording, but try to learn some of these, even if it's just the short ones. Just try to commit some of these to memory, just so that if anybody ever asks you something about the prayer, or if you have a question yourself, you can refer back to this in your own mind. You won't have to open a book. You'll be able to know something like the Prophet ﷺ said, "Indeed, the 5 prayers remove sins just as water removes dirt." So it's very short and simple, but it's something that is an encouragement, and it's a way of tying what we're doing today to the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, and to that community, and to what they were doing. And there's so many of them, even the short ones, like the key to paradise is the ritual prayer, or anyone who deliberately skips a prayer has forsaken his faith. And the explanation of that is that he's turning his back on his iman and is at risk of it being stripped away. It doesn't mean that he's lost his iman, but it's a way of turning your back, deliberately. Like you're just sitting there, you go, I'm not going to pray. I refuse. It's a bad place to be. So you should know that all of this has been addressed. And if you look through these, and there's many more in the books of hadith, you'll see that almost everything that you can think of regarding the prayer has been addressed in one form or another. And any challenges that you might be facing have also been addressed, sometimes just by saying, just by a word of encouragement that the Prophet gave us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Isn't there a hadith that says, but basically if you don't pray, you're not considered a Muslim?
So there's like the hadith that I just stated, or there's another one which is the difference between a person, a Muslim and a non-Muslim is the prayer, or the thing that distinguishes the Muslim from the pagans is the salah. In a sense, it's literal, right? Because the salah, especially what we have today, we're really the only people that are doing this. 5 daily prayers every single day, preferably in congregation, and it's a specific type of salah, right? So there's a literal sense of that. We're the only community that really does this. But also in a figurative sense, the prayer and the commitment to the prayer is what separates you from losing, is what's keeping you in the deen and what's keeping you from losing your faith. So anybody that completely abandons the prayer, while technically still a Muslim, they've lost like the biggest connection that they have with Allah, right? So this is our opportunity every day, 5 times a day, to reconnect with our true purpose, which is to be the servant of Allah. And Allah has asked you to pray, and even the motions of the prayer express that servant. And so a person that's completely abandoned that and turned their back on it has lost like a huge part of their religion.
I have a question about making up prayer. So, is there like an order let's just say I didn't miss a whole lot of this. Let's just say I took a nap after the Zohar, right? But I didn't wake up till like Maghrib time. Is there an order in which I'm supposed to make my prayers?
That's a good question. So the question, if
But I
anybody,
made Zohar. I made Zohar on time.
the question, in case anybody didn't hear it, is when you miss a prayer or a group of prayers, is there an order in which they have to be made up? The answer to that is if it's a day's prayers, an entire day, 5, you have to make those up in order. So say you went to sleep, you didn't pray Fajr, and you wake up and it's already Isha time, pray them in order before you pray Isha. Anything more than a day's worth, just make them up, however you can, whatever's easier. So there's people that have years of prayers that they've missed, or weeks, or whatever it is. If it's a day or less, make them up in order. So if you miss 2 prayers, you're at work, you didn't pray Dhuhr or Asr, you got caught up, and now it's Maghrib time, pray your Dhuhr and your Asr before you pray your Maghrib. So make them up in order if they're within that day.
Now, like what you said, the example about Maghrib though. If in the course of me making up my 2 other prayers, let's just say there's 20 minutes left before Maghrib ends. But I still do it the same.
That's a good point. So you're supposed to make them up in order. And I'll give you an even better example with just using 2 salahs. So you miss Dhuhr, it's close to the end of Asr time, right? Asr time is about to go out. You should still pray Dhuhr first, unless it's going to make you also miss Asr. So if you only have enough time to pray those 4 rakats of Salatul Asr, pray those, and then make up the Dhuhr afterwards. But if there's still enough time to make that prayer, then pray the one that you missed and the one that's in its time. And that's if you're right at the edge of missing the second.
So the default is always pray the ones that you got if it's a day or less, right?
Yeah, so the rule is if it's a day or less, make them up in order. And if you're getting close to the end of the current prayer, only do that if you can still make the current prayer in its time. Any other questions? Okay. All right, so we're up to chapter, I think 17, right? The Qibla. Who's gonna take on reading duties? Okay. So regarding this, the obligation is to make a reasonable effort to find the Qibla. If you're completely cut off from like looking outside for some reason, you can't see where you're at, and you have no idea what the direction is, you're probably just gonna have to take a guess from your best estimate. If you can go outside, you can look up at the sky, you can see which direction the sun is setting, or which way it's moved, or something to that effect, something that will give you some idea. Or you can look outside and you know that there's a highway that runs north-south, and that's so. Do your best effort to find out where it is. If you were completely wrong, and there's still time for that prayer, repeat it. If it's after the prayer, you don't have to repeat it. Jump in here. So the subsection here is that there's 5 distances that you might be related to the top, starting from directly inside, out to these distances. Inside, obviously, if you're inside, you pray towards any of the walls. So there's 4 walls, it's a square structure. Any of the walls is fine because you're actually inside of it. You can't pray on top of the Kaaba, and I think we discussed that last week, but standing on top of the Kaaba, you can't pray there. You can stand there, it's not harm to stand there, but you can't pray because you can't face down. If number 2 in the Haram Sharif, that's the mosque structure that's in Mecca built around the Kaaba. If you're in that structure, you direct yourself towards the Kaaba itself, whatever side of it you happen to be on. So if you see pictures of prayer in Mecca, you'll see that it's actually like a circle going around and everybody's facing towards the building. And when it says turn your chest, because that's really what the direction of the prayer is, right? It's the way that your body is squared up towards. So if the Kaaba is this way, you square your whole body up there. You don't just turn your head towards it. If you're in Mecca itself, but not in the mosque structure, you pray towards the mosque structure. Even if the Kaaba is a little bit this way, and as long as you're getting towards that mosque structure, and it's a pretty big structure, then that's your direction. And if you're outside but still within half the distance of the earth, we're further than that, then if you were to take a map and divide it into 4 pieces, wherever Mecca is, you pay towards that direction. So if you're, like, say, in Turkey, right, it's not that far from there. You cut that section of the earth into 4, that's the direction that you're praying to. Now the 5th one is going to need some discussion.
Spherical nature of the earth results into your possibility depending upon methodology. If one were to determine the Qibla by a common observation, it is obvious that Mecca is southeast of Jersey, that would be the direction of the Qibla.
So if you look at a globe or a map, New Jersey is actually north as far as latitude of where Mecca is. And obviously it's towards our east. So just looking at a map, it seems like it's southeast. And there are that is a valid position that some on the map hold, and there are even some masjids even here in New Jersey that are directed southeast. Go ahead.
If one were to use scientific knowledge, then the spherical nature of the earth would render the shortest route from New Jersey to Mecca to be northeast, known as the Great Circle Route, because the earth is traveled along long distances and cannot be traveled in a straight line. Thus, the Qibla is on the side of northeast.
So this is the majority view. This is most messages that you go to are going to be directed in America are going to be directed northeast. The reason for that is that the Earth is a globe, and so that straight line that you go north to southeast, you'd actually be having to travel directly through the Earth to do that, right? So it's not actually a realistic direction. So what the ulama have determined, the majority of them, is that you follow what would actually be the shorter distance, which is to go northeast.
That's what if you take a plane in Mecca, that's what you would take as a great circle.
Right.
It's
So
the
you
shortest distance.
Exactly. So if you were going to fly from here to Mecca, you would fly northeast because it's actually closer.
Can you repeat that?
So 1,400 years ago, the Muslim world was not that big. It was big. The Muslim world grew really quickly, but it wasn't all the way over here yet. So this is something that's really just come up sort of recently. So the number 4, that half the distance to Mecca, most places in the Muslim world were that close. There were some exceptions even then, but most places were that close where the general direction was what you really needed to find out. What was your question?
I was just saying, could you repeat that question?
Oh, she said 1,400 years ago, is that what people did? Did they figure out, calculate that the shortest distance would be northeast, or did they go just in the general direction? And so that's what we're doing now, because we're calculating by the shortest distance, not necessarily what it would look like if the Earth was flat, what it would look like. And the next page. So Sheikh Shadi throws this in because it's true. If your calculation of what direction to pray in is pretty wide. So if If the direction is this way, and you're facing this way, you're still within the legitimate direction of the Qibla. If the Qibla is here and you're facing this way, you're also still within the legitimate. So if it could be either one of those, then going this way is perfectly fine. So we shouldn't. The point that he's making is definitely try to figure out the correct Qibla and be as exact about it as possible. But both are acceptable positions, and any position within that semicircle is also legitimate. So don't go crazy about, did I have to turn like 1 degree this way or 1 degree that way, and I have to make a right prayer. Yes.
Sorry.
No, please. Questions are good.
It's an app you can put on your phone, right?
You mean where did this ruling come from? Well, I'm gonna have to double check it, but my understanding is that as people started moving away from Arabia, they needed to figure out what the Qibla was, so they just kept praying in that direction, the direction that they went. So if they traveled east, or if they traveled south into Africa, or if they traveled west towards North Africa, towards Morocco, they just prayed in the direction that they came from. So just the general direction.
Where did like half the distance come from?
That's a great question. I don't know where that. Yeah, I don't know why that division comes up.
Praise like towards the general direction. I don't understand like why does it matter the shortest route?
I think, and that might be a modern thing, and I'm sorry, I really don't know, but I'll find out for sure. My understanding is that once you get past half the distance of any place on the globe, the actual curvature of the Earth starts to come into play into what's going to be the closest direction. That's when you start having to go, like, if you're flying somewhere, you start taking whatever the shortest distance is, even if it's not the most, what would look like the most direct route.
Yeah, I understand that, but like why does it have to be the shortest? If you look on the map, it says southeast, like
Yeah, southeast makes sense. Well, that's why they're both valid. Yeah. The majority of the ulama have taken the position that it's whatever's the shortest distance.
there's like no.
Well, you're supposed to. So the Earth is a globe, right? And you could actually pray pretty much in any direction and eventually spin around and get to wherever you're going, right? So the shortest distances would be the most direct to face the. Yeah. Because I mean, if you're in Mecca, right, you could turn your back on the Kaaba, and since the Earth is spherical, you actually would, if you traveled in that direction, eventually arrive to the Kaaba on the other side, right? But that's not actually the shortest distance, or the most direct. Anybody else? All right. So this is a dividing point in the book. And this is where we start getting really into the description and the explanations of the obligatory prayer. And what time is it? 8:30. I think that's actually a good place to stop, so we can cover that section on. We can start that section fresh next week, inshallah. So, any other questions about any of it? Anyone?
Can you pray in the car?
So you should. That's a good question, actually. If you have a legitimate reason to not pray standing up, as in you're sick, you don't have the strength in your legs, or there's real danger. If you step out of your car, then you can pray sitting down. But it's not. If there's any chance that you can actually just pray normally, then you should pray normally. I know that a lot of people feel more comfortable doing that. They don't want to stand out, obviously, if they're like on the side of the road and you don't know what's going to happen to you. It's a bit of a judgment call, right? It's like that thing we were talking about earlier. You should just be wary that you're not giving yourself excuses and ways out of doing things in an easier way when it's not absolutely necessary. If you feel that it's absolutely necessary and you really feel like you'll be in danger if you pray outside, then that's fine. But if it's just out of shyness and embarrassment, then that's something that you have to try to overcome.
Can anything be forever?
What's What's that?
Can any fabricated prayer rug, or like even like a?
So you don't even need a prayer rug, right? So one of the hadith that's covered in here, the entire earth is a prayer, is a musalla, a place of prayer for the Muslims. So you can pray on anything as long as it's clean. If you want to lay something out and pray on it, then that's fine too, as long as it itself is also clean. It doesn't contain any impurities on it, any najasa. So you can lay out a scarf, you can lay out a cloth. I was telling Sheikh Shadi recently that I have a friend of mine who's Turkish who had a bunch of leather prayer rugs that he kept in his car, specifically for praying outdoors, where the ground might be uneven, it might be wet, it might be gravelly. The leather is pretty thick and it's resilient, and he used that for a prayer rug. And I prayed with him once on it in a McDonald's parking lot. It was really helpful.
It's not a single flat spot in Turkey.
Yeah.
It's all mountains.
Yeah. So yeah, you can pray on anything as long as it's not something that's not just silk. Silk.
Silk is valid if it's out of like sort of display of wealth for the men as a group. But still valid.
Sheikh, since you're here, one question. The dividing of the earth into half the distance and more than half the distance,
Yeah.
is that a recent ruling?
That's a recent, like very recent. When they just realize that if you think logically, Mecca is southeast. But because of the spherical nature, when you see jets flying, the shortest distance actually is northeast. You have to go up and then down because of the spherical nature of the earth. So then Sheikh Said Ramghuti of Syria, when he wanted to sort of judge between two groups, one was praying southeast and other praying northeast. So then they were having a conference and they disputed over that. So he gave them a solution. He said, if southeast is valid, northeast is valid, then due east has to also be valid. So just pray due east. So that's what that was.
Al-Idrisi was the first guys that established it.
Oh yeah, Ladrisi was a Christian map maker. Well, and what he derived from that is that basically the bigger principle they derive from that is that when you're more than halfway across Mecca, then all you need is one of them for either east or west. It's got to be either east or west. Well, they're sort of forced into it because Muslims haven't been here except recently. So the question didn't really pop up until recently. Ever since, really, like, if you look at the 1900s, before the 1900s, there weren't even Muslims really in Europe in large numbers enough to think about this question. So all the Muslims were in a small pocket. So when they spread, the more Muslims spread, the more new questions come up, and this was one of the questions that came up. So they had to answer it.
It's an interesting point that Sheikh Shadi brings up, and it's one of the reasons why you see like the Maliki and Hanafi schools, they have a lot of rulings for a lot of unique situations, and it's because those two madhabs really went out from the center of the Muslim world, encountered other populations, other religions, and the issues just came up, and so the ulama had to deal with it and come up with the rulings for them. Where if you look at the Shafi'i and the Hanbali schools, often you'll find that their rulings are very limited to stuff that was actually occurring in the early part of the school.
It makes sense. The more you try, also the more technology changes, we have to catch up in the sense that not to change anything in the past, but you're going to be brought questions that are new. All sorts of new questions are going to come up. The way people are having children is a question that came up. Right? In various ways. For example, if a woman now, you could take the egg of a woman, the sperm of a man, and put it in a third woman. That's possible right now, right? Now, can a Muslim do this, right? And the answer, they have to come up with an answer. The answer happens to be no. They can't do this. You can't have two moms, right? You can have a parent mom and then one biological mom. It cause confusion in the lineage and in the child. So all these types of things are always coming up.
But the second woman is one of his wives. That's a fine.
Then it's going to be really messed up.
I took a class at Rutgers a couple of years about this.
Yeah.
Is it, like they said for modern, was it new questions that pop up, that they would use the hadith to put, like, use an example, I'm not sure how to explain it, but like.
Analogy.
Like the hadith to make a decision.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing.
Yeah, same method. Quran, Hadith, analogy, and then overall arching purposes of the religion. What's the purpose of religion? And one of the purposes of religion is to protect people's lineage. So every child, he's got to know who his mom is without doubt and who his dad is without doubt. Because once a kid has doubt on who his mom or dad is, it hurts them so badly, they're scarred for life. You could do adoption, yeah, but the kid still has to know who his dad is. You can't tell him I'm your mom or I'm your dad. He's got to know who his mom and dad is, if that information is there. Or he has to know that you're not his mom, but you can treat him like you're his mom.
So it's not, you don't hide from the kid.
Yeah, you want to hide it from the kid. It's very important for people to know who they are.
Really?
But what were you doing?
Yeah, no.
So, when I might have missed this, but when they were talking about directions, right? Was there any talk about like how you would assess the direction if you were in a moving vessel? Like if you're in a plane or if you're like in a train, particularly.
So-
like how you would assess the direction and how you would negotiate where in those situations.
So in a plane, nowadays, almost all the planes, they'll give you a flight pattern of where you're at, right? Let you know where you are, with like a little map. So you have a good idea of where you are right now, and so figure the direction from that if possible. You should know which direction Mecca is. So if you're flying from here to Mexico, you're still kind of going northeast, right? If you're flying to Europe, or if you're flying out to East Asia, right? You're flying out far, you're still going to have an idea of where you are in the world at that time. So that's going to be your direction.
There's no room in a plane to like kneel or stuff.
So Sheikh Shadi had some good explanations on what you do in a plane. You make your best effort, right? So if you can, get out there in the aisle, and it's like, it's like Saudi Airlines or something, and they're going to be okay with it. Go for it.
He said, get out there in the aisle.
Saudi Airlines, they have a mosque in the plane. Saudi Airlines, they got a little mosque in the back of the plane.
Flash.
If you
It's not
can't,
that attract the attention.
so if you can't do that and you can't afford to fly first class, well, they'll let you do anything you want, because you're paying so much money. So stand up and bow and sit for the portions that you would normally be making sujood. If even that's a problem because you're flying, I don't know, you're flying to Texas during like the Tea Party convention. You just happen to be the only Muslim on that plane, and everybody else hates you. Sit and be as discreet as possible, but make a judgment. Again, and it's been the issue since we started today, the first chapter with the issue of the khufs. Always make that judgment, and just try to be as honest with yourself as you can, because you don't want to always be giving yourself more dispensations than you need. But also don't put yourself in a precarious situation when the dispensation is available. So, and be honest and know that you have a nafs and that it's strong, but take the dispensation because it's there for a reason.
I mean, one of the things that comes up for me, I guess, when you're talking, is that, like with a lot of things, I think about the stuff in advance, or with certain things I think about in advance, like with having kids, right? Okay, they're gonna be in a situation, what am I gonna have for them when they're, downtime, whatever? Like, I think that I need to be responsible in the same way, right? And think, like, even when I'm booking a flight, is that gonna be during a prayer time? Because if I can book it for another time, why would I put myself in a situation?
That's actually a great
You
point.
get what I'm saying? Like, I gotta think about what I'm doing Just like I think about other stuff that got to do with just pretty much.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, and even in simple things, forget about booking a flight, right? Like you have to go somewhere, and Maghrib is 10 minutes away. Can you afford to wait the 10 minutes and pray at home rather than be on the road and then go, oops, I gotta pray? Or if you're planning to go somewhere, you know, on a Friday, can you time it so that you're near a masjid and you can make a Jum'ah and not have to miss it? Things of that nature. So yeah, pre-planning is always good. What's that? If you're like traveling, yeah. So if you're going a certain distance, absolutely.
Like 50 miles and beyond.
48 miles.
So like an
But
hour away.
I'm sorry?
I said like about an hour away.
Yeah, it's usually about an hour if you know when you travel. But so if you're gonna go to like somebody's house, they live like 30 minutes away. If you can afford to wait those extra 10 or 15 minutes to actually pray rather than be on the road, and then you do hit traffic, and now you're out on the road for over an hour, it's still not the distance to combine, but you're like completely missing the prayer. Yeah. Yeah. So, if you can pre-plan, if you could make, or like I related to you earlier about Sheikh Shadi saying, you know, keep a stone in the car and a bottle of water, you know, just for contingencies. Any of the walls. Yeah.
So I mean, like, just as an example, if you're inside, facing, like, let's say the side of the wall, like, there's somebody outside of the car, like, we pray, like, facing each other.
Right. Well, also, even outside of the Kaaba, right? So say this is not square, but say this is the Kaaba, right? And there's going to be rows of people, and they're praying in like a concentric circles all the way around. So these people are facing this way, and these people are facing this way. It's the same thing. Yeah, so you could in Mecca be facing through a wall, facing another believer who's praying, which is kind of nice.
You're actually allowed into the Kaaba at this point?
Can't go
Or on
in.
top of the Saudi police let
Yes,
you on top
I'm
of
sure
it?
if you have like a lot of money or prestige or something.
Guests, they take the guests. Nothing. I think they say underneath it is a treasure, because one of the signs of the end of time is that the Kaaba is destroyed by a man. End of time, no. It's destroyed by a man, a king, and he unearths a great treasure underneath it. So there could be a treasure.
So you said there's nothing in there?
Yeah, there's nothing in the actual Kaaba except stilts that hold it up, hold up the leaves. There's actually nothing in it. It's empty.
Realistically, you're praying towards the walls, not the center of the Kaaba.
That's a good point.
Because, like you said, you pray inside the Kaaba, facing,
Yeah.
not the center.
Although, you know, I get the imagery that you're going for. Even if you were to try to pray towards whatever the actual center, the Kaaba is a big building, but it doesn't look that big, but it's huge. But if you were to try to pray towards the center, you were still in the facing one of the walls. But you're saying now turn your back on that center
Yeah.
part, yeah.
It's a very scientific religion, I like it.
What's wrong? It is. You know, what Brother Vini said is that it's a very scientific religion. And that's true. You know, there's a lot of books written about the science in the Quran or the science in Islam and stuff like that. And those are useful for a lot of reasons. But most importantly, there's nothing in our books that contradicts anything that we've learned up to this point about science, scientifically. There's just no contradictions whatsoever. And sometimes some ulama have made statements regarding this in the Quran means such and such a thing, and then later scientifically that scholar is proven wrong. But that doesn't necessarily, that was an interpretation of something. Like one good example is there's an ayah in the Quran that talks about the bees producing honey from their tomb, right, their stomachs. And And one of the scholars of tafsir, explanation of the Quran, said that that really meant his the legs that were on his midsection, right? And later on, we've discovered that no, in fact, it is from their stomach, like honey's bima. So, and he was a great scholar, but he made an interpretation. He did the best he could with the scientific knowledge that they had at the time, and said it's got to mean such and such, when in fact it actually meant literally that. So,
And how would they know about the blood flow? You know, it's like,
So I sort of butted in here.
no, it was very helpful. There were some questions that we had.
If you don't have any other questions, I want to tell sort of a little story or something, a little refresher. Is there any other questions for Alex? No. Come, please sit. No, that's fine. Kick some off this. Sure. There's a verse in the Quran that's very important for us to think about, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do people think that they will make a claim to faith and not be tested? And this ayah is something, it's one of the verses that we should think about often, just think about a lot. And one of the reasons for this is that if we believe for every attribute of Allah that we genuinely believe, and we know that there are collections of 99 names, right? 99 names of Allah. We should try to get those and study them. But for everyone that we believe, our belief is just a statement of willingness to believe, right? Just like someone who gets a job, they give you, if they want you to do the job, but they actually don't want to commit to you, right? They give you something called like a statement of employment. It's not a real contract. It's just a statement of intent, right? It's meaningless. They can fire you at any time. But when our words are like that, it's just a statement. Then we follow it up with actions. We follow it up with little actions. You start believing Allah's generous, then you start giving from your wealth, believing that Allah's going to give you back. Believing that He will give you back. But the true test of faith, or the true belief in that attribute of Allah, it comes out when He Himself manifests it to you, which is really hard to grasp. Because Ali ibn Abi Talib said, someone said to him, how do you know God so well? He said, I only know God by how God made Himself known to me. So what does he mean by that? What he means by this is that when we believe an attribute is one thing, but when Allah Himself manifests the attribute to us, so what does that mean? For example, Allah Azza wa Jal, He's a savior. One of His names is that He salvages people. He saves them. It's one thing we all believe in that. But has anyone ever been, for example, drowning, right? And then a wave just pushed you up? Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam, right, has a well-known story that he went to all Catholic, went to Bible school, did all this stuff, had no effect on him whatsoever. But then one day he was drowning. And then he shouted out, God, if you save me, I'll work for you. I'll devote my whole life to you. And immediately upon his saying that, a wave came and pushed him onto the shore, and he was saved. Then he changed his life around. So you see how much words were taught to him in the Catholic schools. Years and years of teaching. But what actually entered into his heart and changed his life and gave him real belief? This belief is now experience, right? So there's one thing between belief and now there's experience. So now he's experiencing. He experienced what does it mean that God exists. Likewise for us, but for us the key is this. You're never going to experience that Allah exists in a comfortable way. There's always got to be some challenge. If you believe in Allah, that Allah is all powerful, and you always tell yourself, Allah can do anything He wants, You'll never truly believe that unless you're in an impossible situation, between a rock and a hard place, and you don't know how to come out of it. Right? So when we have to look at our situations. Whenever we're in such a position, right? That's at the moment. Now that moment, Allah can manifest His reality to you, His power to you, right? When you're in difficulty, when you're in financial difficulty, then His generosity manifests when He pulls you out of it. When you're between a rock and a hard place. This is why the elders of the past, they used to observe the youth and the people. They used to observe the people. If a guy just lives a regular average life, right, and nothing happens, they don't bother with it. But the instant a guy, for example, starts getting sick, more sicknesses, then car accidents, then more sickness, then poverty, they know the name of Allah, the patient, right, is he's soaking it up. He's being patient. Or a person who is in between a rock and a hard place, right, and he's having this type of issue. Then they watch this person remain steadfast, doesn't waver. See, if you waver, it's like you walked out of the movie theater. You're not going to see the ending. You're not going to see it, right? So, but if you stay steadfast, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He pulls you out. He does something you never imagined Him to do, right? And that's when the true name of Allah Azza wa Jal, or the true power of God becomes clear to people, when the impossible becomes a possibility. So for this reason, when we look at the divine attributes, and when we live, we Muslims, we break down all the barriers that your brain puts up. Your brain puts up barriers. I can't give charity because I'm going to need this money later. That's a barrier that your brain put up. Tear it down. I can't do this because XYZ is stopping me. I really can't do it, right? That's a barrier your brain put up. Anything that you want is possible. Put it down, right? So this is something I thought of, because this is something most believers at one point or another, they're going to experience something like this. The key is to stay steadfast and wait until Allah wishes to bring out the result. We don't force it ourselves. I remember myself when I was 17, and I had a sort of childhood hero, right, who was starting up a full summer trip to Morocco to like a camp. Full summer, right, teaching people deen. And I wanted to go so badly, but there were maybe a couple hundred applicants. And I didn't know what would make my application pass. But that summer it was so dramatic, because you wanted something so bad that you were going to die if you didn't get it. And that's what I was in. So halfway through, I got that. I met the Sheikh in Brooklyn in February. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. He said to me, come to my program. I said, great. How do I get here about it? There's no internet at the time. He said, it'll be advertised. It's going to start in July, okay? And it's going to be in Morocco. So I'm waiting for an advertisement to pop up on the wall of the mosque. No advertisement pops up. I happened to run into someone, right, who knows about this. So I got the application. I filled out the whole application, sent it, right? Probably in my mind is all running. I sent it to the wrong address, right? Months passed. I got no word from him. Finally, I talked to someone. I ran into a guy who debated me about Christianity. So I called up this guy. I said, you're a Christian. I need to ask you a question. He said, look, forget your question. Where's your application? Right? They never got your application. So I had to redo it. If that Christian guy hadn't debated me at work, I wouldn't have ever called that other guy. So one thing leads to another. So I sent the application again. Again, I sent it. This time it arrived. Again, I got no response. And now we're getting like literally weeks before the program. And this is Morocco, and there's not something like you're just going to drive over the next day. So another situation happened in which I ended up having to call someone for some other reason completely. And they said, oh, you wrote your phone number wrong on the application, right? You wrote your number wrong, and they're trying to call you because they want to shortlist you, as they want to interview you for it. And subhanAllah, if it wasn't for that, whatever that other situation was, I wouldn't have ever called that guy who knew about the situation. Because back then, there's no email, there's no Facebook, you can connect with someone at any time, right? So I ended up giving him my right number, and eventually I got the call, did the interview, and then eventually I got into it. But that's something I remember that was, the chances were so slim, and there were so many obstacles to it that seemed like it's never going to happen. Like literally it's never going to happen. But then these events, when they unfold, they show you. There's no way that this is an accident. Allah is there and He's powerful. He only rewards people when they're sincere and they do things right. Right? The thing is, you got to do it right. You can't take shortcuts. So this experience, the point of my message here is experience. And so difficulties, challenges, obstacles, welcome them and embrace them, because through challenges is how we have experiences. And you should have an equation in your head. No challenge, no faith. No different than a workout. No pain, no gain. In this world, no challenges, no faith. There's a guy in the community. He's maybe 20 years old, but when you talk to him, he's like 40 years old. He's so responsible, so mature, takes care of his mom, goes to school, goes to work, pays his mom's bills. Mom doesn't speak English, right? That boy, the mom said, you know, this boy, she always feels sorry for the boy because his dad abandoned him. The dad abandoned the boy, just went back to Egypt. So someone, aunt or someone said, you see things differently. I see things completely differently. I say, God took away your husband, but He gave you a man. He made your son a man because He had to. Right? He had to. No challenges, no faith. No obstacles, no faith. So inshallah, embrace your obstacles, embrace your challenges, and know that Allah is there, watching, and He'll get you to where you want to be if you do it right. Okay, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والصلاة.
Let's eat.
What we got, Miraj? What is that, a cake?
What? No, these are cookies.
Oh, cookies? Wow, for elephants? That's you? Oh, okay. Oh, give me that stuff.
That's all right.
It's happening now. It's alhamdulillah.
Yeah, do it.
Is that rambling?
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, real iman is real experience. Everything. Everything is experience.
You could have just taken it. No, you could just ask. I would have given it to you. My brother, like, come on, man. Out of it, fine, you can have it. I don't need the stomach ache. I'll tell you.
What's happening, my man?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You're doing good, man.
Thanks.
I
I have a good teacher. One of these days, I'm going to tell you my how I came up with it.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, man.
You know, it's not something you can